Welcome to FreightWaves Today, Julie. It is Friday, and I'm glad it's Friday. Like, it is wonderful that it's Friday. Long week.
It's been a long week. The first full week of school at our house. So,
Is this the week where the adjustment, the routine is different?
Last week they just had 2 days. This week they had all 5, and soccer practice all week, and they are exhausted. Like, they both fell asleep the minute they hit their beds last night.
Well, that's good. That's the way you want it. My son was at Kamp this week. He's getting back. First time he's been away 7. So, I'm excited to hear from my wife how that went. But we talk about news in trucking and in freight. There's a lot going on. Today, we're going to get into talking about the used truck market. So much happening in the used truck market. It's a very dynamic market. It always is. It responds to the market cycle. Just something that we really need to understand what's happening with used trucks, because it tells us a lot about the state of freight. We're also going to talk about trailer insurance with Centerline's Andy Kuchar, who really says that trailers are underinsured. And I think in this market, we know that there's a substantial issue and risk. And then we're going to talk about the driver recruiting market and really what's going on in the driver recruiting market.
Driver health.
And driver health. So we're going to get into all of that with Jeremy Reimer. He is the founder of Driver Reach, but he's also has something called Project 61, which is all about health. So
Do you know why it's called Project 61?
No.
The average lifespan of drivers is only 61 years.
Is that real? Oh, man. Well, that is something that I think we're going to get into.
Yeah.
So excited to spend some time with Jeremy, because he definitely has his pulse on driver health, but also the driver recruiting market, which I think is something I'm particularly interested in. We've talked about the challenge of finding drivers in this market, so it's really important. Let's go to the headlines.
We kick things off with a violent cargo theft case that shows just how dangerous rail corridor crime has become. 5 men are now in custody following a 2-day investigation that began Monday evening when gunfire erupted from a moving BNSF freight train in Southern California. BNSF personnel had encountered possible railcar burglars near Cajon Boulevard and Keenbrook Road in Devore around 6:04 p.m., and one person discharged a handgun toward a railway officer as employees tried to deter the activity. Authorities arrested 21-year-old Angel Castro on attempted murder, cargo theft, and conspiracy allegations, while 4 alleged co-conspirators, Jorge Sarmiento Ochoa, Miguel Humberto Grajeda Carrizos, Jesus Jose Grajeda, and Cesar Giovanni Grajeda Medina, face cargo theft and burglary tool possession charges. When task force members stopped the group's vehicle Wednesday in San Bernardino, detectives found equipment used to burglarize rail cars, underscoring how armed cargo theft crews can endanger railroad employees while disrupting freight moving through major corridors. Over in the finished vehicle sector, a wave of consolidation is reshaping the competitive landscape. Overland Park, Kansas-based Acertus, has officially acquired Auburn, Massachusetts-based Fisher Shipping, expanding its network of carriers, customers, and relationships with original equipment manufacturers and dealers. Fisher Shipping will continue to operate under its existing banner and leadership team, but will now have access to Acertus's expansive carrier network and platform, which provides enhanced fraud prevention and real-time shipment visibility. Fisher Shipping CEO Dave Fisher will receive an equity interest in Acertus and will manage customer and commercial relationships for the combined organization. The deal follows another massive acquisition earlier this week when Proficient Auto Logistics agreed to acquire California-based Pierre Hansen and Adkins for $130 million, creating a combined entity expected to haul over 4 million vehicles annually, roughly 1/4 of the new car market. Finally, ocean carrier Maersk is betting that vertical integration from port to doorstep is the key to winning the last mile battle. According to Prashant Shah, head of e-commerce for North America at Maersk, last mile delivery is no longer just a cost center. It's a data intelligence engine that reveals upstream issues like inventory allocation, product development, and order response times. By connecting every link in the supply chain, from vessels crossing the ocean to final doorstep delivery, Maersk aims to reduce the information gaps that often emerge between transportation providers, warehouses, and delivery networks. Rather than building its own last-mile delivery fleet, Maersk manages a pool of carriers on customers' behalf through a multi-carrier model with single API integration, one communication channel, and one consistent customer experience. Joe Johnson, head of pricing for Maersk Ground Freight in North America, emphasize that the final mile is the part that's visible to the end customer, making that end-to-end connection a critical market differentiator as consumers increasingly buy from overseas sellers and expect to track the full journey.
So, Julie, I think the thought of it reminds me of these old westerns of people shooting at trains, like absolutely insane. And look, it's good they got arrested. It's really kind of insane that you're shooting at.
Totally insane. I was just saying I wrote a sit rep this week about rail cargo theft that will come out next week in Sonar, and I'm going to need to amend it and add this story because they just keep getting more violent.
Brazen,
And,
organized crime. You also have cartel that's involved. A lot of the theft is organized crime that's going after it. And really, we talked about Corca being a bill that is navigating through Congress, but not very quickly. The need to increase the investment, the cross-jurisdiction in law enforcement, coordination in law enforcement, to be able to go after these organized crime syndicates, which are definitely a plague on society and like more and more violent, like really, really kind of scary stuff. Duffy actually announced something. Talk a little bit about what Duffy.
Yeah, so I was laying in bed last night scrolling X, not healthy, but it's what I was doing. So he was on Fox News yesterday, and he was really kind of going off about these 22 states trying to block the administration from getting all DMV files in order to verify who are driving semi-trucks, right? So his plea or thought was that we obviously, to get a CDL, to do any of these things, you need to get a background check. And that they want to be able to get access to all of these CDLs and who these people are driving to keep American roads safe. I don't know the legality of this, and I don't know if you and Loeffler are going to talk about it later, but I can't imagine states suing the federal government saying they don't want to share public records of who.
But this has been going on. I mean, I can't imagine it because it's been going on for at least since the administration.
But I mean, I can't imagine what the argument could be.
Because it's political, and it ultimately comes down to this states have their perspective on things, and the federal government, there's been the DOT under Duffy has been pulling or threatening to pull funding from, that's how the DOT really ensures compliance with their own agenda, if you will, is really using the funding and basically pulling money from highways. And look, states depend on the federal government. They don't, unlike the federal government, states can't print money. So they desperately need the dollars that go into their highways. And this is how the federal government uses the funding, the purse, to really force compliance. And I think that what you're seeing is in the 22 states, no shock, New York, California, you can go through the list, those states are at odds with the federal government. And this is really a political thing more than anything.
Yeah, he also, I think, took the opportunity while talking on the topic to talk about what the FMCSA and DOT have done in order to try to crack down on non-domiciled CDLs and remind everyone that it was a year ago, August 12th, that there was that horrific accident in Florida where a non-English speaking driver made an illegal U-turn leading to 3 fatalities. And
look, I think this immigration story is a absolute lightning rod for the. It's a major story. It's one that creates a lot of emotion. And I do think that the DOT has the benefit of talking through safety. I mean, the reality is you don't see a lot of protest at truck stops of drivers being detained and deported. Like there isn't it's a very different look.
Yeah.
Than when you're going into neighborhoods and you're pulling out families with kids. That's a hard thing to watch. But when you're at a truck stop and you're taking someone who's not licensed, or doesn't have the proper, credentials, that's a very different sort of issue.
And to me, it's not even about immigration as much as in this case, and the specific example of this, this accident with the White Hawk driver. He failed the English language proficiency exam there, and also
California actually
could only identify 2 out of the 12, I think, road signs that were asked. I mean, so there's no question that it was a matter of
his original CDL test in California. He finally got, but to your point, he wasn't proficient in English, and ended up crossing a median.
The political lightning rod out of it of immigration, and it really, in this case, boils down to safety.
Well,
If you have a
I
driver who
actually
can't speak English and read
I think the facts are
signs.
actually on the administration's, like the reality is, and this is, I've said this before, is that when it comes down to the immigration story, it's very different of walking into a fast food restaurant and taking out a fry cook.
Right.
Or walking into a neighborhood and you have ICE agents pulling people out of homes with children. That's hard to watch. It's very different when you're able to, the administration's able to argue, even statistically, if the immigrants, the non-documented immigrants or non-Dom CDL drivers had the same exact safety profile. Statistically, just sample size, you're going to have fatal accidents. But it gives the administration a safe place to be able to tell their own immigration policy story in a way that I think the public generally will accept that this is a safety story. And so, but the challenge is that because this has become so polarizing, is that states that are, left-leaning, or blue states, look at this as if it's federal encroachment. And it's just, it doesn't matter if it was a different administration, we'd be flipping the script. And this is a tale as old as time. Everyone's into states' rights until it benefits them or doesn't benefit them. And just politics.
Yeah.
So, look, I think everything has to be viewed through that lens when we're talking state versus federal, because that's what it's all become, unfortunately, which is a big problem. We'll be right back after these messages. We're going to get into trailer insurance. It's a big issue. Fleets are underinsured. We're going to get into all that with Central Line Insurance Company's president, Andy Kuchar. Stay with us.
The drivers, dispatchers, mechanics, and crews who keep the world moving deserve tools that work as hard as they do. That's what Samsara builds, technology for safer, more efficient operations, made with the people who do the work. Samsara, built with operators for operators. Learn more at samsara.com.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network. Billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts. 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. We have Andy Kuchar here in studio to talk about trailer insurance. So this is not a topic that a lot of people are talking about, but one thing that you're passionate about is the fact that trailers are criminally underinsured, I think is the term that, tell us a little bit about why you believe that's the case.
So about 5.5 years ago, we got approached by one of a big retail insurance agency, actually based here in Chattanooga, because they saw a need for trailer insurance, really specifically for freight brokers that had pools of trailer pools that they used to service clients that were underinsured. Because they're taking those, they're putting them in the hands of motor carriers to better serve their customers, but ultimately, if a lawsuit happens, they're going to get brought into that because that's their piece of equipment that they gave to another motor carrier. And it was interesting, the very first policy that I looked at was written by a very large company that you would know who they are, and I won't say their name. And the freight broker said to me, well, we're covered. It's nothing we have to worry about. They literally had thousands of trailers in their case. I looked at their policy. I was telling you earlier, I've got a PhD in insurance. Nerd alert, right? So
We love nerds.
yeah. So I looked at the policy and it had a very specific exclusion for trailers over the road. Well, over the road is really mostly where the exposure is. We've had lawsuits and claims where the trailer's parked somewhere and a claim occurs, but for the most part, they occur when that trailer's over the road. So the coverage was with a great company. It was inexpensive, but it didn't really cover anything.
So the broker that gone out and bought thousands of trailers, or rented thousands of trailers probably, was unaware of the risks that they were assuming with this.
Absolutely.
And I think as you see brokers, I mean, years ago, Convoy, one of the things we covered the story extensively, was one of the reasons or contributing factors of their failure was this trailer fleet that they had gone. It's very different when you know how to manage trailers and you're a trucking asset carrier. It's a completely different story when you're a broker. But what you're highlighting is the fact that trailers, the policies may exclude that entirely.
They might. So most folks, I think we started, when we launched this product 5.5 years ago, it was squarely aimed at freight brokers that leased trailers that needed coverage, usually to evidence to the lessor. So they're trying to go get trailers to better serve their customers from a leasing company. The leasing company always wants auto liability coverage. They can't get it because nobody in their right mind would sell traditional commercial auto liability coverage to a freight broker because that would expose them to every load that they brokered. They won't do it. So how do they lease these trailers and make the lessor happy? We created a policy that specifically covers them and it covers the lessor and bakes them into the definition of the insured, and that makes the leasing company
So when they're
happy.
under power, when the broker is using that trailer that's leased, they are insured under your policy. Is that right?
Whether they are, whether that trailer is, I call it at rest or over the road, they're covered.
So if a trailer's sitting, somebody runs into it, it's covered. That doesn't have insurance, it's covered.
We actually had a situation, a really unfortunate situation. We had a claim where the trailer was parked. There was a gentleman who I think was just trying to honestly just be a go-getter, and he was unloading building materials from the trailer and by himself, which he wasn't supposed to be doing. He was supposed to be doing it with a team member. This building materials fell on him and killed him. And then the trailer lessor, our insured, got brought into that claim because they made some sort of legal argument against us. But that's
Was it just like the trailer walls fell? Was it structurally secure?
No, he had just made a mistake. And when somebody makes a mistake and somebody passes away, sort of everybody gets blamed.
We've talked about this.
And the same that, if they're at your home and they make a mistake and it's no fault of your own, right?
Yeah.
You have to have
And so they
coverage.
were brought in and, in a lot of those situations, what we're going to do, because there probably isn't a whole lot of liability when that trailer's at rest, is we're going to provide a legal defense and get them out of it. But, today to get somebody out of a claim is usually at least $100,000
It's
in
crazy
legal
how
expenses.
expensive it is. I was talking to my brother who was CEO of US Express years ago, and he said, we're talking about all these nuclear lawsuits. And he's like, that's not the issue. It's all the smaller claims. He's like, they were like, it was like 1 out of 5 trucks in their fleet in a typical year would get some, and it was small claims. a driver scratched a lamppost, or it was all this small stuff. And he's like, that's the stuff that kills you.
Oh my gosh.
Because you have to go file with the local county or city and put it into
Absolutely.
court and hire an attorney.
Especially in dedicated fleets, they back into a light post, or they're trying to back into the dock and they damage the wall next to it or whatever. And then the same thing, a lot of damage happens there for
they happen to be in
trailers.
a multi-car pileup, that it's just like a fender bender. You get
We used to sell regular trucking insurance, not just for the trailers and freight brokers, but just regular trucking insurance that anybody with a motor carrier authority would have. And we still have open claims from those legacy programs. At one point in time, a third of those claims, the property damage from the accident was under $2,000, and the bodily injury on those claims is 50, 75, 100,000 because somebody's just going and treating to drive up the claim value. So your friend's right. It's the little claims
that very often.
Anytime you have money, there's money there, people will drive up. This is an opportunity, right?
Absolutely. For some folks, it's a lottery ticket, unfortunately.
So does this also apply? So certainly to brokers which to Craig's point, I merged our U.S. Express brokerage and like over-the-road asset customer service teams. And brokers don't know anything about trailers or how to manage them. I wrote a sit-rep on it because they don't even, in some cases, understand trailer pools and how often they should move. So certainly a huge benefit for brokers. Does it also apply to shippers who have large trailer fleets that maybe operate with a dedicated carrier or that are company branded?
So we have sort of three different customers, if you will. Squarely the freight brokers first. We also have a lot of companies where I'll call it it's a transportation firm, if you will, and they've got the motor carrier arm, they've got a freight broker arm, and a lot of times they have an equipment leasing arm. And so I would say, generally speaking, anytime that you own or lease a trailer and somebody else has it in your possession, like that scenario, that's probably a concern for you. And that's the type of thing that we provide liability cover for and property damage coverage for. And then the last one really is, and it's really jumped up today, or jumped up in the last, I'd say 30 to 60 days. We have now signed master programs for a half a dozen leasing companies because, hey, they're the next logical target, right? It's one thing for a freight broker to give that trailer to somebody, but the same argument could be made if you're leasing trailers to somebody. Well, why did I give that trailer to Andy? Andy's a horrible driver. Look at his FMCSA scores. You're just putting him out there and giving him something that ultimately can cause.
Do you work with Repower?
I literally.
Because I'm on the board of Repower.
I literally just was right.
I guess I'm allowed to say their name. We do.
Okay.
We launched the Repower program was the second one that we launched. Now in that case, that's property damage.
Yeah.
They didn't ask us to do the liability side, at least not yet, but yes, it is.
Yeah, I was just curious. On the board for full disclosure, and just curious if you would talk to them, because I know that this increasing liability, plaintiffs' attorneys are trying to find every single party that has, and I've heard this story from a very large freight broker, is that what they're seeing right now is that a lot of plaintiffs' attorneys are bypassing, like in the post-Montgomery world, they're just bypassing the small carrier altogether. Guy has one truck, they don't even want him.
Yeah.
They're going directly to the broker because they realize that going after the one truck guy isn't going to help them. There's nothing there. It's the actual broker is where the big dollars are.
Absolutely, yeah. That little guy's got probably $1 million, right? They only have to have 750,000 coverage under federal law, but they rarely have that. They usually got $1 million.
Tell us a little bit about Centraline itself, because it's not a name that is perhaps as familiar with as some of the other insurance offers and firms out there. Are you guys actually a carrier?
So we're an insurance company that's domiciled in Tennessee, and we're owned by Watkins Associated Industries, which a lot of folks will know from Watkins Motor Lines that ultimately became FedEx Freight. At one point in time, Watkins owned as many as, I think, 7 trucking companies, and the family lore gets a little bit squishy here. I've heard that we were the 3rd largest privately owned trucking company at one point. That was what the Motor Lines was. Don't know if that was correct or not. It was big, regardless. It was $1 billion in revenue.
I knew Watkins from the FedEx pre-FedEx days.
Absolutely,
obviously big. So you're part of the family of companies. So your focus is trailers specifically.
We do 2 things. It's primarily trailers and then per shipment cargo. And the per shipment cargo is on high value loads. And it's interesting, most of the business that we write today on that is actually inbound freight from Mexico. So if somebody picks up a load, let's just say it's, auto parts, and it's $1 million load in Mexico, it'll come in typically through Laredo and then into the interior. We also provide coverage for that as well. The trailer products, the per shipment cargo products is almost 10 years old. The trailer one is, like I said, 5.5.
So if a company has an existing broker and they're thinking, okay, where do you guys fit into that? Is this really, I have a trailer concern, I have questions about trailer insurance. Is this where they should be involving you guys in the conversation?
They should, absolutely, because we can help them understand what they really have coverage for and where those gaps might be, and then they can make a decision about how do they want to close it up. And so for some folks, we have different programs where we are covering people repositioning trailers, for example, and we're covering the liability exposure there. So it runs the gamut in terms of how that cost for the insurance coverage itself is passed on. Sometimes the freight broker absorbs it, sometimes the shipper/customer absorbs it, and sometimes it's somebody else. And so we're agnostic on that part. It's just whatever better suits the customer.
Now, are you working with other brokers?
We work with anybody that has customers that need this kind of coverage.
So if there's an insurance broker that's listening that's saying, hey, I need to find a specialty product, they should reach out to you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, we work with a large number of them.
You mentioned one that was in Chattanooga?
Reliance Partners?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I figured that was who you were talking about.
Yeah, that's one of our largest partners, yeah.
Chad and Ronald over there at Reliance, which is our neighbor right here down Great Alley.
So if a company is thinking about the coverage they currently have, what are 3 signs that they might have an insurance gap? What should they be looking at to know?
It's a great question.
If they need to reach out.
So I think 3 things on that front. So anytime I see the word contingent in a policy, to me, that's a red flag. Contingent on what? I'd be asking some questions there because I would rather have coverage I know was designed for me, that's going to protect me, and I don't have to worry about something else triggering coverage. The second thing I would be concerned about is situations where you're really relying on somebody else's coverage. A lot of folks will tell me, oh, that the person who picked up the trailer's got me covered, and they gave me a certificate of insurance. And then I always ask to see that and say, well, look at the top of it where it says, this confers no rights upon you, because that's just the way the insurance industry works. And so I think, those are situations that I would always be concerned about, not having a dedicated policy, having contingent coverage, really relying on somebody else. I think those are all things that you should be concerned about.
Andy, I want to talk a little bit about the risks post-Montgomery, because the risk profile is now exponentially bigger than it was before for freight brokers specifically. What are you seeing in terms of how are trailers factoring into that risk?
So, I always tell folks, I don't think that you should ever run your business scared and afraid of lawsuits. I think you should understand what your exposures are and then go insure them and build that cost into your business. But the reality is, it's one thing to broker a load to a motor carrier. It's a different thing to give them now a piece of equipment, specifically a trailer. That increases your liability exposure. I don't think you should change what you're doing as a business and say, well, we don't want to do that. I think you should serve your customers the way you want to serve them. And if having a trailer pool is the right way to do that, then do that. But get coverage for it so that you don't, wake up one day with a lawsuit that you can't pay for.
Now, one of the things that shippers do when you have a trailer pool is they love to shift trailers around on the yard. Is there a suggestion that you should get additional insured to ensure that the shipper, if they're going to move the trailer, is also insured, or how are you thinking about that?
We can cover, if the shipper is concerned about that type of exposure, we can easily endorse them onto our policy and make sure they're covered. And I would say probably in the last year or so, we've picked up a lot of business from drayage. Containers hitting a port and then they're getting moved around the port area. I had to learn what drayage was. It's sort of a confusing thing.
You're an insurance nerd. You said you got a PhD, is that right?
I do, from the University of Georgia, also known as the Harvard of the South. So
Harvard of the South. It didn't used to be that way.
No, I know. There's only 2 things people want to do on a Friday: talk insurance coverage and have an adult beverage at the end of the day. And we're knocking one out right now. So
yeah,
great.
Yeah. That's SEC football. If you're down there,
absolutely.
So what is the piece of advice for folks that are listening? Is there anything that they should take home from this conversation that, I need to do this today?
I think you need to start asking some very pointed questions of your insurance agent to say, do I really have this covered, and show me?
Yeah.
Because even the folks, that the very first person that I mentioned at the outset that thought they had coverage, they didn't after all. They didn't have it for what they really needed. Which
And they
was the
should be
over-the-road
calling
side.
you, because a lot of brokers, insurance brokers, even if they have a great relationship, they really need someone who understands this.
Absolutely.
And you
is
can
designed a
review their
policy
current policy.
specifically for it.
Absolutely. And the
But
devil's
you could
in the
also run this
details.
through. I would imagine, I mean, I'd love to run everything through Claude and say, hey, tell me where my risks are.
I'm a Claude fan too.
I imagine that's also a really good opportunity to ask the same question. So they may not have to reach out, but if they're looking for insurance, if they want a consultation, or if they're looking for insurance, even if they have another policy, they should reach out to you guys.
I think it's a great idea. If nothing else, they can sleep a little bit better and say, look, he's looked at it. I've written literally every word of every policy we've ever issued. And so I'm very
That's
comfortable.
why you're a nerd. You wrote the actual words?
Self-appointed. I did every word of
sounds
it.
brutal.
And so, yeah, I can tear one apart and let you know whether or not you should sleep well at night or not sleep it well, and think about it more,
It's great.
Well, really appreciate you coming in to
Yeah,
studio.
absolutely. Great to be here.
And, you're just right up the road in Atlanta. So.
Yeah, not too far. It's a couple hours, easy.
Well, we'll be watching this story. We've been talking about trailers. We got Matt Leffler here later this afternoon. He is a trailer whisperer. Him and
Okay.
Chris Hines.
I
the
know
only
Matt.
people. Now I met somebody else that loves trailers.
Yeah.
So we'll get back right after this. We're going to talk the used truck market with Chris Backerberg. He is the president of Daimler Trucks Remarketing. He'll tell us all about the used truck market here shortly.
If you own or lease trailers, you may have a coverage gap you don't even realize exists. Centerline offers customized trailer insurance solutions for freight brokers and transportation companies, including liability and physical damage protection, with limits up to $1 million. With flexible pricing, customizable coverage options, and a dedicated claims team, Centerline delivers protection built specifically for the transportation industry. Visit centerlinepc.com to learn more.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. We're going to talk used trucks with the president of Daimler Trucks Remarketing. Used trucks is really what they do at Daimler Trucks as a part of the largest truck OEM. Chris, welcome to FreightWaves Today. Let's talk about the used truck market. Inventories are always a question. What exactly are you guys seeing right now? Chris, can you hear us? I don't know that we have Chris. So Julie, the entire truck market is so, all this contingency around the truck assets, asset valuations are always tied to sort of the cycle. Any thoughts on what we're seeing right now in the freight market?
Yeah, I'll be really interested to hear if those cycles of trade-ins and replenishment are dragging out longer, and certainly Chris will be the person who can talk to us about that. But are carriers investing in new trucks? Are they trying to keep them for longer? We certainly know that large carriers have trucks parked, right, without the ability to necessarily seat them, as driver recruiting has become incredibly hard. But I think that the other thing is used truck prices go up. I always like to watch, I don't like to watch, I hate to watch, if coming out of a cycle like this, bankruptcies go up, because when the assets aren't worth much, nobody wants that. Nobody, they want the company, the bank doesn't want to repossess a truck that's worth nothing. Right?
Years ago, so New England Motor Freight, one of the sort of legacy, old school truck LTL carriers out of New Jersey, filed bankruptcy. And it was early 2019, and we had just come off a really strong freight market in 18. 19 was, it was but it was interesting because back in those days, one of the reasons it filed bankruptcy was that the assets were worth so much money. It was a combination of the truck assets, but also the real estate.
Yeah.
Maybe the real estate was really there. But I thought it was interesting because there are moments when the lenders don't want the trucks back when the market's soft. But when the market is strong, if they can sell them, they will repossess them. If the market's soft, they don't. And so you actually see this acceleration of bankruptcies and foreclosures that happen
a better freight market
as the market comes back. In fact, Celadon, one of the things that I talked to, we had their former CEO, Paul Svindlin, on, that was what they saw, was that the lenders started to foreclose on the assets, which is really sort of what predicated the ultimate liquidation of that business. You also saw at Central Freight Lines, the Waco, Texas-based LTL carrier that Jerry Moyes owned, was they did the same thing, was this liquidation, this orderly liquidation, due to asset values having this, really nice premium. And I think you see that. And so the idea that we're going to slow down in terms of bankruptcies just because the market is increasing doesn't always play out.
Especially for those companies who can't outrun their debt at this point, right? So.
No, and look, some of these operators paid, top dollar, top of the market. Then you have the balance sheet, you have interest rates higher, inflation.
And three really hard years of a terrible freight market.
Well, I think, look, the bottom line is that balance sheets have memory. And so if you've accumulated losses over many years, and then you have this issue of you have driver availability, which in a tight market, drivers are finding, we've covered this extensively, is that this is a very difficult market to find qualified truck drivers. And because it's a difficult market, everybody's competing on it, you have to pay more. And if you don't keep your drivers moving, they will move to somewhere that they can be moving. And so it's all these factors that are really playing into this, cycle that I think is really quite challenging.
So some other news that I was reading about this morning, and I would love your thoughts on it. This advocacy group asking the FMCSA to revoke TQL's
this group
brokerage license.
It's the small.
I just don't.
It's the small
based
truckers.
on broker transparency, but they've signed an agreement that they opting out of it, right?
It's
opting
the
out
small
of the
truckers. They do this all the time, and they've created noise. They attack it. Ken Adamo, who was with DAT, used to be all this back forth vitriol. CCJ, they've gone after Randall Riley. They've gone after me. I think it's the SBTC, the small carriers, and they seem to like to find these very provocative, big headline stories that drives sort of the membership. It's a group that is very passionate, but at times they pick these fights with much bigger organizations. I think it makes them in many ways relevant. That necessarily, I don't put a lot of credence into some of these arguments.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, I didn't feel like there was anything there other than a lot of noise and headlines, but curious about, I'm not sure what they're even standing on,
Well, I think that's the big question. And look, you could ask Ken Adamo when he was at DAT, it was the same thing. He was they were accusing him of being a part of this rate conspiracy and the fact that DAT, and look, as much as I like to pick on DAT, and as much as I have issues with some of DAT's business practices, the fact is that DAT does not control pricing. Like I wish I could say that.
Too fragmented for anyone.
They don't have any they don't actually control the pricing. They're a pricing reporting agency that reports pricing. And I would say that Sonar's data, this is me, I'm certainly biased. Our data's better. But I would also stick up for DAT to recognize that they don't actually control the pricing, and the market is too fragmented, is too if they were actually doing something to manipulate pricing, then people wouldn't use them, and that's just not the case.
No.
So it's sort of it's rare that I would take up for DAT, but that was an example where it was like, you guys are just so unhinged that you're picking these fights that make no sense.
Yeah, and in this case, it was about the broker making too much margin compared to what the carrier was being paid, right?
But
so
they pick these lows that are like a single transaction where the broker made 40, 50%. But like broker margins, take the public brokers,
also,
12 to 14%.
Who cares? That's the broker's job, and they were able to do it. They negotiated well. Carriers have
it's
access
easy to point out on the, and they've also gone after the whole broker transparency. They've been one of the group that's been pushing that, and this whole idea that, 14%, 40% margins, maybe on a load every now and then. There were times that we got 40% margins, but nobody. Go look at the largest public
not in this market,
brokers.
Right. Yeah.
They're not making the kinds of margins that they're being, I'll call it, accused of making. I'm sure they would love to make 40% margins, but that's not happening. Their stocks would be absolutely ripping. So look, I think it's just it's one of these like fringe stories that we occasionally get to cover or fortunately have to cover, but I wouldn't read anything into it. So.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with the Sonar update.
You ever see yourself short on trailers right when demand picks up? Our friends at Premier Trailer Leasing can help you stay ready. With more than 70,000 trailers and over 40,000, trailers with 40 locations nationwide, Premier gives businesses flexible access to dry vans, reefers, flatbeds, and chassis when plans change. They're known for transparent pricing, quality equipment, and 24/7 in-house road care support. So you can get more than just trailers. You can get a partner that helps with your operation and keeping it moving. Visit them right now at premiertrailerleasing.com to get set up before your next big search.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts. 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. Julie, Sonar time.
We're going
What
to
do
do
we
the
got here?
Sonar update live today.
I like it.
So I thought we would start by talking about really a high level, over the road, market level update. And then we have to talk about intermodal because it's so hot right now.
Yeah, intermodal. I don't know that we've had a year where intermodal's gotten so much attention, but it has become such an important topic for this year. And I almost think the reason intermodal's so hot as a storyline is because we've seen some softening in trucking, and yet intermodal's still ripping it. And I think some of that is really interesting, where people have talked about the softness of the truckload market in the last 2 months. Maybe there's this belief that this is a capacity driven, but the intermodal market's speaking a completely different tune, as the railroads have been incredibly strong.
Yep. So speaking of this current market and a little bit of softening, I wanted to start by really putting in context the tender rejections, right? So while tender rejections are down to about 13.5%, you can see over here by Craig, when you look at the last 3 years year to date, I mean, it's still a massive gap, right? I want everyone to remember that while 13.5 might feel a little low compared to where we were in this crazy time right now, it is still massive compared to where we
go back. So the nice thing about Sonar is you get to see where we were. At no point the entire year, like look at this. So this yellow line would have been last year.
Yep.
So right here, this is 2025. That yellow line never got above 13.5, even during the peak season.
Even at the end of, yeah.
And remember,
by November is when it started to pick up last year.
We ended in December, and that felt incredibly robust. So yes, things have cooled off from this June, late July peak. Early July peak, July 4th weekend. But it's not by any stretch. This is typical seasonality. In fact, I want to show you this. One of the things you can see is just the seasonal. The nice thing about the seasonal chart of Sonar is you see multiple years. It always shows up this way: July 4th, July 4th, July 4th. Even in these small muted years in 2023 and 24, you could see just it always responds to that. And we don't really see a peak, a pickup until that last week of August, headed into Labor Day. And then after Labor Day, we start to see peak season ramp up. And I would expect that again this year.
Yep.
Is that we will start to see rejection rates tighten, increase. So while we're not seeing that yet, there's no sign. It's not falling. Like the nice part is it looks like it's consolidating. I find it hard to believe that it's going to get any significantly softer. We're past back to school. Maybe we're in a little bit of back to school, pushing that. This morning, I had the opportunity to spend time with a major mall operator. And what they told us is that consumer activity is really robust, is they're very positive, very constructive to the economy. And I think that tells us what we want to hear.
Yep, that's great. So to put that in context, tender rejection, I wanted to show the map, what we've been talking about regarding that. The dark blue is where tender rejections are higher than the rest of the country. So it's the middle of the country, southeast.
It's the middle of the country.
So if and when we start to see these coasts pick up,
it's big. This is Big Ten, Big Ten and Big 12 country. That's where your rejections are.
Manufacturing,
SEC down here, but really, do we think this is foretelling for college football? Do we think that the Big 12 is gonna dominate this year?
I don't know anything about the Big 12, so I can't tell you that.
Oh,
but
come on. You're a Big 10 person.
my gut says no.
No, you don't think this tells us anything about college football? That's all I'm thinking about. College football starting soon. Everything has to do with college football right now.
All right, so I wanted to put it in context with volumes. So the blue line is this year. So we're back to where we were in 2023 this time of year when it comes to volumes, but still significantly above 24 and 25, which are the green and yellow lines. So volumes really are remaining really pretty elevated, and you can see that now in the last few weeks it is beginning to tick back up and normalize out, whereas it was falling since
since May.
early on.
Look at it since really, you had this big
June peak.
big surge. Actually, just end of May, Memorial Day weekend, was sort of that big surge in volume. We had sort of coming out of Memorial Day, it happened, but it fell throughout the month of June into July. And now that we're in August, it looks like it's consolidating. But remember, peak season, we'll get a little bit of push into Labor Day. And then volumes don't drive peak season as much as just overall capacity tightness. And so what's interesting about the holiday rush is time you get, because you have a finite date. You need most of your products, if not all your products, in by Black Friday. So everybody's trying to get it into their supply chains mid-October to early November. If it's not into the network, it's unlikely to make it to retail, into the brick and mortar stores, because most of these big box retailers and e-commerce companies control the last mile. Mm-hmm. So they don't really, they'll take pop-up fleet capacity, which we're not going to see, by the way. One of the things that I don't think people understand is this is taking for-hire transactions, those private fleets and those dedicated fleets and even pop-up fleet transactions typically are not through these open tender networks, and therefore it doesn't show up in the data. So what you don't see is a lot of the peak activity show up. But when you look at the for-hire market, you're going to see, that this is probably as weak as it's going to be.
Yeah, and I do think it'll be interesting to watch peak and see if it's more elongated and less volatile than prior years, because we are seeing that.
We have been told
we're seeing that in imports, right? That it's been more elongated and less volatile.
I mean, look, it's interesting talking to our guest, I think it was earlier this week, about the retail season being early. I think she called it Summerween.
Summerween, yeah.
Which is really Halloween early. And I've talked about the fact that you see Halloween candy out in the stores, which is really crazy.
All right, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on spot rates, but again, I really wanted to put all this into perspective, as a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, spot rates are falling, everything is happening.
It's all relative.
We're still $1 above where we were
$3.34
in 23, and we're 21% above where we were last year.
The peak rate, if you go back to the all-time record rate, was I think $3.62 a mile. The reason I know that is I declared that if we didn't hit record rates, I would go to Turkey and get hair. My wife was against that, so it probably would have been an expensive decision.
Oh my God, they use that all the time.
See, what was it,
It's terrifying.
The record hit was 350. It is terrifying. I look Amish. I look like, what is that movie with the bowler?
Oh, I don't know.
Anyways, Kingpin. That's what I look like. So anyways, I said if we didn't hit, it's $3.55 a mile, now that I see this, in late 2021. If we didn't get above it, I was going to go to Turkey and get a haircut. I knew that there was a zero risk. Yeah. Like I had such confidence and conviction that rates were going to higher. We're at 334. We're
still,
right below where that record was. We're not too far off of that. And so it does tell you that a lot of the concern about rates.
I wanted to put all this into context today, right? People are like, oh, the market's cooling, the market's cooling, the market's cooling. It's not soft.
It is typical seasonal softness.
Yes.
Combined with more freight moving by intermodal because there's more time in it. Imports have come in earlier this season than last. No one should be concerned about the state of freight.
All right, so I could not talk about intermodal. So I wanted to talk about intermodal contract rate per mile versus truckload contract rate per mile, which is going to lead me to the next thing about intermodal savings.
So this is intermodal contract, that's truckload.
So this is just the last 3 months. And what I wanted to show was that contract rates for truckload are absolutely rising, 7.5% in the last 3 months. And while there's some volatility in this intermodal contract rate, it's been relatively flat. We're at 0.6%, right, in the last 3 months.
34% delta between, I'm already ahead of you. Or
34% cost savings from intermodal to
you have a 34% discount
truckload to intermodal, yes.
of putting things on train, door-to-door pricing, by the way, putting it on a train versus truck. Why would you not take advantage of that?
Unless you don't know how, or you don't have the time to add a
So,
day transit in some cases.
We have a lot of
So-
Wall Street investors that tune into the show. You have to be bullish on companies like Hub Group and companies like J.B. Hunt, Schneider, Knight Swift, which have very large intermodal operations, J.B. Hunt being the biggest of those. Domestic intermodal is where it's at right now. And the railroads. Of course, the railroads
Yeah.
are beneficiaries of that. But this tells you that these companies are getting a lot of share. And one of the interesting things, we've covered this extensively, but I'll repeat it for maybe those folks that haven't tuned in, is that because the intermodal volume is on the eastern half of the U.S., or the increases, a substantial amount of increases, largely due to the savings index, it's just so lucrative right now, that actually helps the railroads pick up more share. Because what we've seen in the
That's
past
also
cycles-
where truckload capacity has been the tightest.
It is, exactly. And you
So
can't
that
find
makes
drivers.
more sense for mode conversion, right?
100%, where you can't find capacity. There's a significant discount. We're not seeing an increase in the contract rates for intermodal. And so shippers are taking advantage of it. And I think what this tells us is that the railroads and the intermodal operators, IMCs, are picking up a lot of market share. And unlike past crunches, like if you go back during COVID where you had that massive intermodal crunch because you couldn't get chassis, they were on a different part of the country, all this stuff. The fact that these are on the eastern half means that the railroads and the IMCs can balance their networks so much easier. First of all, the length of haul is a lot shorter. You're not going across 2,000 miles. It's more directional. There's more freight that goes between the east and west. The north and south, and goes east and most of the intermodal stuff goes west to east.
Right.
What's really interesting about that is that means that the intermodal operators and the railroads are going to pick up more market share. So there isn't as much finite and isn't as many service issues as what we've had in the past.
Yep. And then speaking of intermodal being so hot and so important, I couldn't not talk about the fact that Sonar did release a new intermodal API this week. It is available. It will soon be available in our UI, but rates are available via the Sonar API now for 2,000 plus intermodal lanes.
Including Ontario to Mobile.
Perfect timing with, I don't know about that graphic, but perfect timing with intermodal being in such a great spot, and really mode conversion being something that everyone should be looking at.
Ontario it's the Inland Empire. It is sort of the core of so much freight comes out there. Years ago, we actually did a story about Ontario being the top freight market, and the Ontario airport thought we were talking about the airport air cargo. And they did a press release that got picked up by the LA Times. And the reporter for the LA Times goes, "Where did you get this data?" I was like, they just took the ONT airport code and used that. And that was a funny story.
That is hilarious.
That Ontario
but yes,
stands
the Inland
for
Empire,
Inland
oh my
Empire.
gosh, if you've ever been there and driven around,
San Bernardino,
it's amazing.
Colton, Fontana, all of
Irving,
that. Just warehouse after warehouse.
Yeah.
Warehouse for miles.
Yep. All right, so that's it for our Sonar update for today. The market is, while it feels relatively stagnant at the moment, putting it in context, it's still incredibly hot.
Yeah, things are robust.
It's summer, so.
It is summer. And it's almost football time.
All right, we will be right back after this break.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Well, we're at FreightWaves Today. Let's talk about the drivers themselves, the most important part of our entire industry. Jeremy Reimer is the founder of Project 61, but he's also, and perhaps I've known him always, as the founder of Driver Reach. Jeremy, I know we're going to talk about Project 61, which is all about driver health, really important mission, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the driver recruiting and retention market right now.
All right. Well, great to see you, Craig. It's been a little while. So I think what we're seeing right now, obviously, we've been suffering the last 4 years.
Who is we, by the way? Who is we in this scenario?
The industry in general. It's been a challenge, for most trucking companies out there, and so the demand for drivers just hadn't been there. It's kind of been missing, except here recently. I think as we've been right sizing. My impression of what's happened, I guess, over the last several years is with COVID, we had this major pendulum swing shortly after kind of things started to open back up in mid to late 2020. When everybody piled into the industry, including lots of PE. And then on top of that, you had such a mass amount of capacity that as soon as that started to settle, you realize, we've got way too much capacity and the demand, wasn't there. So having to right size that over the course of the last 4 years, I think when pendulum swings far one way, it overcorrects the opposite way. And so that's at least my perception the last few years. As you probably know, I sold Driver Reach last year, so I've sort of been a little bit on the sidelines from that and have been focusing primarily on addressing the drivers that are in the industry because sadly their life expectancy is just considerably shorter than yours and mine.
Well, before we leave this conversation, because I still you're connected to this. I know you track the data, and I know we're going to get into driver health in a second, but the idea that there was a driver shortage, that the ATA has sort of changed their narrative a bit on that in recent years, or actually the past year, because they still insisted on it until late last year. Do we think the idea that there really is a perpetual driver shortage, is that argument done with now? Have we learned our lesson that creating this sort of open-ended opportunity of no regulation, no barriers to entry has just created our own environment that we're all suffering from?
Well, that's a thing, right? Absolutely. If you have low barriers of entry, then you're going to face the opportunity where there's a lot of folks getting in the industry that shouldn't be. So setting that aside, I think we can't ignore the economic peaks and valleys that impact anyone referencing a driver shortage. At least, again, that's from my perspective as an employer of drivers prior to Driver Reach for 15 plus years. And so, for example, the demand for drivers, as a former owner of a truck driver staffing company, the demand for drivers was always tight. It was always strong, even in not the best economic environment, with the exception of the Great Recession in, you know, 08 and 09. And of course, I would say actually 2019, I noticed that pretty significantly leading up to COVID. And so from that standpoint, you know, I think it's important to see this through the lens of what's happening in the overall economy, and how does that dictate, you know, that you know, sentiment about there being this driver shortage, people feeling like, I need drivers, I'm in a bind. And then also when companies aren't leveraging technology enough, when those instances occur, they are going to be at a disadvantage because they're not providing a good experience for the applicant.
I mean, I think it's a really important sort of thing. I also remember in COVID, there was that weird period in sort of the summer where companies were firing truck drivers. Right. I mean, it only happened and then all of a sudden,
briefly,
it was slammed. This is actually, I remember it distinctly because there was this big argument. We were seeing early in the data, things were starting to rip, and I was getting a lot of hate because people weren't seeing it, but it was very clear. But there was a period of time, I think it was in July and August of 20, where fleets were like, "Hey, I am upgrading. You know, I'm now thinking differently about my driver pool because I have not enough freight, or I have more drivers than I know what to do with." But that was a weird time in history, and that didn't last very long, Jeremy.
No, it didn't. And honestly, that was, the boom year for us, you know, between, I'd say, maybe summer to fall of 2020, towards the end of 2021, maybe even through Q1 of 2022, some of the strongest environment for the demand for, you know, recruiting and hiring drivers that I'd seen in a long time.
Well, roaring 20s. But let's talk about driver health,
yes.
a topic that we're all very aware of the challenges and passionate about finding ways to fix it. Let's talk about what you're doing with Project 61, what this means, what exactly its mission is, and how you're helping driver health.
Yeah, so you know, as an employer of drivers, for the longest time, I've recognized that that their health in general has been certainly below par. And so, and the challenges that, you know, of their environment, right? Not a lot of access to good or healthy food options, certainly a lot of sedentary, you know, driving, not a lot of movement, and then just poor sleep, on average less than 5 hours a night. And then on top of that, the mental health and the stress. So that is not a conducive environment to health or longevity. So that said, you know, recognizing that, I'm like, how can I help address this problem? Especially once I was done with the driver recruiting side of things, how can I leverage my industry influence and network to really help address this issue? And I recognized that doing this as a nonprofit was going to be the most effective way, not trying to, you know, generate revenue for myself, but really, how can I move the needle? And this is something that I'm really grateful for, because the amount of support that we've received from across the industry is amazing. And it's all about raising awareness, but then providing resources and education, free resources and education for drivers, for fleets, in order to get them to start changing some of the behavior where they can, and being more intentional when it comes to what we call the 5 axles of health. You know, what they eat: fuel, move, recharge, which is sleep, mental drive, which is mental health, and then just preventative maintenance, staying on top of, you know, annual checkups, doctor visits. If you've got, you know, if you're taking medication, make sure you're actually taking it as prescribed. It's those sorts of things that are going to really help move the needle. Doing that consistently, even in this challenging environment, you can still be a heck of a lot better than you are if you're not making those necessary changes.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And it is so hard, even dentist appointments and all of that. When you're not home consistently, or you don't know what your schedule is going to be, it is significantly harder to do those things. So I think adding those tips, tricks,
Dudes
resources
are let's be honest.
We're all bad.
The driver population generally, I mean, what is it, 85% men? Like, we are naturally bad at scheduling, even when we aren't driving, and add all these lifestyle factors that Jeremy talked about.
Can you talk a little bit about how driver health connects to general safety risk on the road as well?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, you know, obviously you've got folks that come to F3 every year that are all in, you know, safety, technology, great companies really making a difference. Companies invest in that because they want to protect themselves from that risk that's inherent in this industry. Yet the main operating system of that truck, the driver, is an area that we just kind of look the other way when it's so important. When you've got a driver who's tired, who's cranky, who hasn't moved or hasn't slept, their ability to react quickly isn't there. When they're operating at maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 30-40% of what they could be otherwise, that's a significant safety risk. This is a sad statement. So I've had an opportunity to speak on this a number of times in the last year and change. And when I'm in a group of fleets, I'll ask this question. I'll say, how many of you are fleet owners? A number of hands go up. And I'll say, how many of you have lost a truck driver who works for you in the last year? And every single hand goes up. By lost, I mean they've died. And I say, keep your hands up. Look around. This is not some isolated thing. This is happening all the time. And sometimes it happens in the cab. You find a driver slumped over the steering wheel, which is horrible. Sometimes it happens outside of the truck or even if the driver's at home. But sometimes it happens while the driver's driving. Think of the risk that the considerable risk there if they have an episode. So it's really important to make sure that we're providing the resources and tools, and especially when it's free, to help drivers be better versions of themselves, not just for the company's safety risk, but at the end of the day, what are we doing this for?
I mean, look,
Yeah,
it's
medical
interesting.
emergencies while driving are terrifying. And then we also, we certainly had incidents of finding drivers who didn't
Who
in
passed
their
away.
cabs the next day.
But
Yeah.
even the Lupus Superior lawsuit, we don't know why the driver died Like, we don't have all of the evidence. It was an accident, but we're not clear on what exactly was going on. But the driver did say he wasn't feeling well.
Days before.
Days before, gets into this accident. It's the largest nuclear lawsuit or a judgment in trucking history, that is going to be paid out by an existing company. And we don't know. It could have been a health issue. And statistically, that should be on the list. If this was the NTSB investigating it, you'd have to consider it because of the issue. I want to talk a little bit about, you've listed off all of the things that are contributing factors. What is the top three? Is it food? Is that the primary? Is it sedentary? Like, what are the things that are causing, it's 61 years old, which is what you have named your business after or your organization after. I think it's telling because that's just so young.
Yeah. I would say the number one thing, in my opinion, is food, is nutrition. And I say that because it's the lever that is so easy to engage. Right? Because at the end of the day, the truck driver who's driving 11 hours, you don't have a lot of opportunity to move. Now, when you do, it's really important to be intentional and to move and get your limbs moving and your blood flowing, right? Just walking is fine, but you do need to move. But when it comes to food, we're all eating. Every truck driver is eating every day, multiple times a day. What are you eating? It's really important that they're eating real human food, real whole food that's actually meant for human consumption and not a bunch of processed or ultra processed, refined carb food that tastes delicious. It's super cheap, shelf life of 10 years, but it's not food. It's actually negatively impacting you. It's not helping you from a nutrition standpoint.
But I would say that isn't easy.
It's not, especially for drivers.
Right.
Because the options are not available to them. And these truck stops, these travel centers.
Don't have time to cook, right? I mean,
Well,
some of them come up with
responding to
Instant Pot and all sorts of amazing
I
ideas.
eat my share of fast food. I have the ability and the option to go home and eat a cooked meal to have fresh food, but it's hard when you're busy. And there aren't, and that's the problem with trucking is that these travel centers don't have a lot of, look.
So how do we get healthier food?
I'm not judging the travel centers because they're responding to the market. People eat fast food because it tastes good, Jeremy.
And it's easy.
And it's easy.
It is easy and it's good. I mean, I don't care if it's poison. It tastes good. I mean,
and it's cheap. Usually it's cheap.
It is cheap and tastes good. Come on, man. Everybody enjoys a good trip to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's every now and then.
Yeah, and every once in a while, that's fine, right? But if that's what you consist on a regular basis, then you're missing out on a lot of the important nutrients that your body needs. And And I agree with you that the truck stop operators, for example, they're very supportive of Project 61 and certainly of driver health. This is their customer. That said, they provide healthy options, and there's opportunity for more. But their argument is, and it's fair, they don't buy it. So it's really important that education. It's really important that drivers are educated on why this matters and what they should be considering, and being more intentional about it. But also, we've got to find ways to incentivize them. And so without getting too much into the weeds yet, because it's still a concept that we're working on, but there are some things that Project 61 has been working on with the FMCSA and Department of Health and Human Services on incentivizing drivers with their purchases at healthier food options. So I can't say too much more than that right now.
Like, gamification is really important, and you can change. And like, I wear a fitness tracker. I have the smart scale. You start to care. It's interesting. As you start to track your own vitals, you start to actually think differently about it. One of the most effective things are these GLP-1 drugs. It's always a favorite topic of mine. But it's changing the brain chemistry because we crave these ultra high processed foods.
Makes it easier to make those right choices.
Well, what I have noticed since I've been on a GLP-1 is that I don't have the same cravings. And I do pick foods that are healthier or less processed. I don't have the desire for a lot of the processed stuff. So it strikes me that we have to change the brain chemistry. These companies, and I'm not judging them because they're responding to market conditions, and I am a consumer of these foods. So I know how addictive they can be. They make the foods so that they taste incredibly good. We crave them. The only thing that I've found is really, you got to change the brain chemistry. And so when you think about things that we can do as an industry, how do you think about sort of the GLP-1 drug revolution that's taking place right now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think if you're 400 pounds, and sadly that's the case with a lot of the professional drivers out there, and they can take and leverage the benefits of taking a GLP-1 and really help them get some momentum going with some significant weight loss. That's huge. And that's obviously an extreme, but there are plenty of folks that they just need something like that helps them get there. Now, that said, I think it's really important to couple that with the behavioral change that's necessary. And it's encouraging that it does feed naturally into a reduction in the desire, as you said, the chemistry.
Jeremy, I was 230 pounds. I was on Ozempic, and then I moved to Mounjaro. I sort of leveled out with Ozempic at around 197, so I lost 30 pounds. Got on Mounjaro, lost another 20 pounds. I'm down to 175. My wife thinks that I should stop, now I'm just maintenancing it because the concern is that
you're fighting weight.
Yeah, well, like, I just think at some point you're like, I'm going to look like one of those shriveled bag of bones. But the reality is, like, now I do a lot more healthier things because I feel like I have the power. Like, this is genetic.
Yeah. Helps you reset habits.
I run in the mornings, which I get up in the mornings. My dog wakes me up at 5:30 in the morning, 6 a.m. I make the dog wake now to first light because I want that morning light. Sure. But I take my health so much more serious because I've been empowered by having the brain chemistry working with me versus against me. And I think that is one of the things that I think the incentives are amazing. But it also strikes me that this is an education. Look, I was well aware, and I'm not a driver, and I know I don't have the same challenges and the lifestyles that drivers do, and I'm not dismissing this at all or trying to compare my life to theirs. But the reality is, even given the options, I wasn't choosing healthy options because I took the easy option.
Yeah. Okay.
And it tastes good.
And I don't think there's any, people call a GLP-1 the easy option. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Like, I think if there is a medical miracle that can help your life and help your health and make you happy,
the data is very clear.
But getting back to the education part of it, right? So I am a huge fan of GLP-1s too. I think drivers, if anyone,
there's a great driver on X, Texas.
They don't have as much opportunity for exercise and the other things. It's harder to make the right food choices. Why not use something that makes all of those things a little bit easier? But I think there's a huge education element of this too. And I think that's what you're getting at, Jeremy. And I think part of it is socioeconomic. I mean, if you think about what you've grown up eating processed foods.
Well, it's cheap.
Things around the outside of or certain parts of the grocery store are a lot easier access, a lot more affordable. They last longer. You can make them last longer at home when you need that. And if you don't grow up knowing what those healthy options are, I think back, and this might be polarizing even to J.D. Vance's book about how he grew up not knowing like that chips and snack foods and Mountain Dew and all of that weren't healthy versus later learning how to eat real food in life because that's just what you grow up around based on your socioeconomic background, right? And what you learn growing up. So I do think education is also a big part of it. I mean, there's a reason why there's books that are eat this, not that. People don't know if they don't grow up around it.
But isn't it changing though? Or Jeremy, are we seeing education because of social media? Now there's a lot of bad information on social media, and sometimes you have to you'll see something like one of my favorite is ice cream is healthy. And they did these studies on ice cream, and it was a diabetes study. And by the way, this is Harvard had published this because I didn't believe it. It was in the Atlantic. Harvard studied it. But they found that ice cream, people who consume large amounts of real ice cream, not the stuff that we typically buy at the store, had lower incidence of diabetes. And they're like, this data makes no sense. And another research group came out and tried to disprove it, and they found the same thing. And it's something to do with something in the actual cream itself that changes the way that your body digests it and has something to do with glycemic index.
Well,
My point is,
if it's the non-processed
I read it.
kind.
There's all this misinformation that felt to me like this can't be true because nothing good is it feels like that's anytime you enjoy something, you're like, there's something bad about this. But ice cream is one of those foods that the problem is I tell my kids and that ice cream's healthy. And I'm like, no, it's not that simple. But anyway.
I made my kids ice cream last night because they both need more calcium.
What's that?
Make it at home. When you make cookies at home, you bake ice cream at home, anything like that, cake at home.
It doesn't have the ultra processed chemicals.
But that's the problem for drivers.
Oh yeah, well we're talking about food. Drivers don't need to be eating ice cream and cake all day long.
No, but I mean they
treats.
can't make it at home so that it's not processed and.
Well, they've got somebody at home. Are we talking about ice cream or are we talking about food that they should? That's the focus.
I think we got
all of the above.
I don't eat before the show, Jeremy, because we do this live, and I don't eat because I find that I'm absolutely trash on the show. I can't think because I have to eat after. So anytime we talk food, anytime conversation about on FreightWaves Today comes about food, we always get off topic.
We got a little far. But the point is, talk a little bit about the education around nutrition that you're providing for drivers, because I think that is key here and where we started before we went off and back.
Yeah. So for example, in our free mobile app, Project 61 app for drivers to download, I mentioned the 5 axles of health. And for example, the fuel axle, there are check boxes every day of making sure that you're focused on, 3 servings of protein, 3 servings of vegetables, 2 servings of fruit, whole grains, healthy fats. And I don't want to just focus on the food part of it, like the solids. Hydration is critical too, especially for truck drivers who by nature don't want to drink too much because they're going to have to stop and pee. But that's counter to how your body works. It needs the lubrication.
That's what bottled waters. That's why you buy the Aquafina, Jeremy. I'm saying, I'm a pilot. I'm not landing to go.
I was in traffic the other day, and a jug did get dumped sitting on the interstate in traffic out the side of a driver's window.
No judgment. I do it too. I'm not landing to go pee. And if I was a truck driver, I would have a bottle. Aquafina, big old hole.
Yeah. Like the old Mickey's.
Julie's like, I'm done. I can't have this conversation.
Right.
We're going way off rails here at FreightWaves Today. Sorry to our audience.
How can drivers access these tools and resources? That's how we can wrap this.
She's like, no, get out of here. We need to cut this.
No, this is a really good topic. We've gotten off it, but it's how can they access these resources?
So certainly visit our website at project-61.org, but also just download the app. Again, it's free. It's specifically for drivers. Not only is it from the nutrition side of it, there's there's exercise opportunities both in the cab, outside of the cab that don't require equipment. It's movement, and it's all progress over perfection at the end of the day. Just making progress, little things were going to make a really big difference. You're going to feel a lot better. And I think what I'll leave it with this, This is a story a driver told me. The reason why he's made the changes, the challenge, it's not easy, right? To be intentional, like the things that we're talking about here, is the driver has on his dash a picture of his granddaughter. And he said his why, the reason why he's made these changes and he's lost close to 100 pounds is because he wants to see this little girl grow up. And that, to me, like helping them, a driver, connect to their why is one of the most foundational opportunities to really help them see that change through, especially when it gets tough.
There's nothing more important than children to give you. For dudes, we talk about how bad dude health, like we're bad. It's my kids.
Yep.
I've changed the way I think about everything. We didn't even get into sleep.
I think that's always been true for women, but I think that like
dads have to sort of
like
grow
when I
up
heard the
with
number
their
61
children.
too, I thought, shit, I want to see my I thought
You're allowed to
I
say
want to
that.
see
It's
my
serious FM.
I want to see my grandkids like old and like I mean, you know.
Yeah. I think women do take it far more seriously. I was talking to somebody today that said they were never scared to fly until they had children. And that's that psychological, like,
I'm not afraid to fly, but I am like international travel or like private flight where my husband and I both been gone. That is something you think about when you have kids.
yeah. Well, Jeremy, enjoyed seeing you. We'll have to have you back. We got way off topic here today.
Love it. Great to
Coming
see you.
up, we
Appreciate
got
it.
Matt Leffler. We're going to get on topic. We don't know what topic that is, but we're going to get on it. Stay tuned for Freight Expectations right after these messages.
The world doesn't wait, so neither do they. Wheels on the interstate, boots on the site, hands on the shipment. We build for the world out here, and we build it with the people who live it. Ideas from the field, made real by world-class R&D to keep the operation sharp, the front lines safe, and the world moving. From one cab to a global network, billions of miles, trillions of data points, every one making your operation better. And we never build it alone. Samsara, built with operators.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference, it's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome to Freight Expectations. This is part of FreightWaves Today. It is the weekly segment where Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney, and I riff on any topic, and every topic is on the board. Matt, you missed it earlier. We had Centerline Insurance on. We are a trailer-specific insurance company. In studio, might I add, my friend. I wanted them to stay over. They're our sponsor for Freight Expectations. I know you love some trailers. I
love trailers, but
so close to you.
There's nothing better in this industry than a well-maintained commercial trailer. I'm on record saying that. But Craig, I have some breaking news today, and I really want to tease this out a little bit. So as of today, I am now the coach of the cross-country team for River Valley Christian School. So I am now a middle school cross-country coach. And Craig, I have never run cross-country in my entire life. I am a track and field runner, but with Jeremy talking about Project 61, it's good to talk about running. So now I am also a coach.
Well, congratulations. I mean, they'll hire anybody to do anything these days. It must be a shortage of good coaches up there.
It might very well be the case.
Really, I mean, look,
be the case.
Cross country, I did it. My kids did it. It's just running. Like, I'm sure there's something, techniques. Claude is perfect to teach you what to tell kids, but how much coaching do you, other than just like pacing, like what is there to it? It's really just raw athleticism, isn't it?
This is what I love about cross country and track and field as well. This is about your only real opponent, and your only real opponent is yourself. You don't measure yourself against other people. You measure yourself, how did I perform today versus how I performed yesterday, and how can I be better tomorrow? And what makes running so interesting and so valuable as something that every American should do, everybody should do, is that you don't need any special gear. You can go do that today without any special training or equipment. It's just a pair of shoes and the ethic and the aptitude to get out there and push yourself. This is why I love these type of running sports, because when you're my age, 41, knocking on the door of 42, this is the kind of exercise that is so valuable and so easy to really do. And I love that you go running every day. Now, I have abandoned running by and large, but I'm going to get back into it.
You know, it's a new thing for me, too. And it's really within the last 3 months. I started to really care about my circadian rhythm. So I got into this whole thing. I've talked about this as GLP-1, started to care more about my health. I got a sauna. I got the sauna with the red light infrareds. And so you get benefits of that. There's this bunch of stuff. But I spend time on my weekends when I'm not working, vegging out in front of the TV, watching YouTube videos. And inevitably, I've been watching these health videos, and the circadian rhythm thing is pretty interesting. So I wake up in the morning, and I don't try not to look at my phone, which is a challenge at times, especially if the dog wakes me up before the sun comes up because I want to get up there for first light. But then I go out and I run, and what I find is I sleep so much better. There's a weird, and I know this is a science to it because you're timing, you're training your body that this is wake up, and this, you know, when it's time to go to bed, your body's ready for that. But I find that if I run, I don't even like pause. I don't stretch. I know you're going to tell me you should stretch. But to me, if I bolt out the door, I'm much more likely to do it than if I think about it. And so it's worked. I live in a long driveway. I live in the country, so it's a long road. But I get about a half mile in every morning, which is, isn't great. I mean, these marathon runners and these people doing the Ironman would say, that's just beginner. But to me, it's an activity.
The long distance is brutal on your body. I mean, if you're marathon running, that's a whole different can of worms. But what you're doing is what everyone should aspire to do. It's about building a habit. It's about doing something consistently. It doesn't matter how long or how far, how difficult you push yourself. It is about getting to that habit and doing it consistently over time that has the real benefits to yourself. I was a sprinter, Craig. I ran the 100 meter, the 200 meter, and the 400 meter. I want to be done as quickly as possible. That's the way I ran my races. But now as I get older, I think there's a lot more in terms of just getting out there and enjoying the outdoors. And with running, you can do that anywhere in the country. You can get up and go on a little jog, get back to your truck or get back to your house, and you're ready for the day. There's nothing that makes you sleep better than just being physically exhausted. What we do is mentally taxing, but when you get out there and do something physically taxing, it gets everything working the right way. It gets you aligned, it gets you excited.
The issue is I have a problem sleeping at night because my brain is always sort of firing with all these ideas and things, and the busier I am, the more exhausted I am, but the less I can sleep. because it's just the way my brain works. But Matt, let's talk a little bit about things going on. What is keeping your brain going these days?
Well, this is exciting. There's a bunch of really fun things happening in this bizarre industry that none of us can escape. As of August 10th, just a couple of days ago, the FMCSA has put out a notice of proposed rulemaking. This is to codify out-of-service violation for English language proficiency. So as of today, about 26,000 citations have been issued against commercial drivers that could not communicate or read English proficiently. And what the FMCSA is seeking to do is get public comment to codify this as an out-of-service criteria based on the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance coming out and saying we want a rule on this. So you can go to the website. I'll send a link to the folks like Isaiah and everything to push this out on all the channels. But you can go as anybody and comment. You can comment on this rulemaking anonymously. You can comment on this thing with your own personal, who you are. I have already filed my comment. I am in big support of English language proficiency as an out-of-service criteria. Realistically, if you can't read the signs on the road, you should not be on the road. That's a simple thing. It's been the law in our country for nearly 100 years, and getting it codified as an out-of-service violation is important, and I think everyone should be focused on this. And if you disagree with me, and many people do, you should make a comment. Like, they want to hear your feedback. That comment period ends October 9th, so you have about 2 months to get all your stuff together. But that is something that is happening right now, and the FMCSA is moving quickly on this.
So Matt, the Sean Duffy tweeted, and we've seen this sort of now the states versus the federal government. Julie and I talked about it earlier. Is just basically this sort of tension between state and federal. And one of the things that Julie had asked about or had commented was, how can the states be against this? And we were talking about the fact this is just pure politics. And what's happening is the liberal states taking a stand that the federal government should not have the right to reject these driver's licenses, these CDLs. And the feds are like, hey, we're trying to manage and regulate, and we do have the right to do this because we control the purse strings. What is your read on this?
This is a fascinating case. So what the Secretary of State has been pushing for is getting access to the driver qualification, like the DMV files from all of these different states across
Secretary of DOT, not Secretary of State.
Yes, sorry.
Not Marco Rubio is not.
He wouldn't want
to. He's focused on college football and football, but not on this. So go ahead.
Absolutely. Thank you for the correction. Yeah. So the Secretary of Transportation is looking at all of these driver records for about 17 million commercial drivers, and they want these records to go through and audit these things last 5 years or so. And some states are pushing back, saying it's not something they're going to give up easily or willingly. The argument the states are advancing is this has things like Social Security numbers, has a lot of private information that they don't believe the federal government should have access to. There's always this tension between the federal government, who has supremacy over the things that they regulate, and the states, who have their sovereignty, kind of in their little domains. My feeling is ultimately those states are going to lose in this, because we do, at the federal level, want to know who the drivers are that are on our highways. And just as we've seen in the last couple of years with the non-domiciled and the English language proficiency violations, is the states have not done a fantastic job. And if we want to see a difference in our industry, you have to have some sort of transformative action. So this is another one of these fights where you have 22 states and District of Columbia going against the federal government. And whether they win or lose, my feeling is they'll probably be unsuccessful, but it's an argument and it's a fight that has to happen. It will
end up eventually likely at the Supreme Court, because anytime you have the federal government, the actual government's fighting, it's the job of the Supreme Court to weigh in on those decisions, unlike a civil case where it's not, the Supreme Court won't take them. I mean, look, you track this stuff a lot more than I do. Yeah. My understanding is when it's state versus federal, the Supreme Court, that's their primary role.
Absolutely.
And so they will take the case if it ends up there, right?
Yeah, and this will take many, many years. So this is just the beginning stages of these things. It likely will end up at the Supreme Court. That might be 2 years away, might be 3 years, who knows. But the reality is what the FMCSA and the Department of Transportation are doing is they're going to withhold funds. They're going to use the power of the purse and say, we're not going to issue these funds unless we get access to these files. And that fight will continue to percolate for, I imagine, several months.
And by the way, this is not the first time that the federal government has withheld money. There's actually a precedent for this. Go back to the 1980s, where they used it to raise the drinking age under Ronald Reagan to 21. It was 18 in many states. To 21, they wanted it to be bigger. I guess they didn't like the college bingers. The argument was that the kids' brains aren't evolved to, these substances are bad for their brains and the behavior and all that stuff. And what they did was they said, look, if you want us to fund your highways, you got to raise your state drinking age. And most of the states complied. Louisiana was a holdout, and that's why the roads in Louisiana, something to be desired. I think they eventually came around to that, not right, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to your point, like when you think about alcohol as the example, I mean, you have people traveling across state lines at a place with a lower drinking age to get access to alcohol. And once they have it, they drive back home. And this is a safety question. Who is on our roads? What is their qualification? How did the states receive that information? And the government, the federal government, wants access to those things. And if they can't get them, they can withhold that money. And of course, there'll be litigation. But this is something that the federal government has supremacy over. I don't see the states being successful, but obviously they have to make this fight because their citizens are asking them to.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch, but this is really a political thing, and it's unfortunate that safety is, a big consideration. I've argued that, frankly, I think when it comes to the immigration story, that trucking there's not going to be a lot of sympathy to the degree that you pull kids out of homes, or even like pulling a fry cook working at McDonald's. People like, hey, is this really a safety thing? I mean, my fries being poured into the bat. Is it really but arguing for truck drivers that they should speak English, I think you can make that statement.
Driving a commercial vehicle in the United States is a privilege, and it is not a privilege that's granted to every single person. You have to go through a rigorous process of training, and you have to be licensed by the state. And as we have seen over the last couple of decades, is an erosion of these barriers to enter. And when you have these erosions of barriers to enter, a lot of people come in, and every truck driver should be celebrating what's happening right now, which is we are twisting the screws to make sure it's more difficult to have a CDL and maintain that CDL, because if there are fewer drivers on the road, that means that rates for drivers will go up. There's no doubt about that. And so goal for everybody is to get home in the same condition that you left, and safely delivering freight on time and undamaged is difficult even under the best circumstances. So this is why it is so important that we keep watching what the Secretary is doing and cheering on when they make good decisions. And then when they make bad ones, you kind of say, well, I don't think I like that. And there are some things that I don't agree with the administration on. But
look, I think very clear, this Iran situation, we had someone on earlier this week. I know you and I have been talking about it. I might be wrong, Matt. I'm going to admit it. Record this because people say you never admit when you're wrong. I do admit when I'm wrong. Tom Kloza, he is the founder of Opus. He is now the chief strategy officer at Gulf Energy, one of the big energy majors. He pointed out that diesel is currently priced at an equivalent of $180 a barrel, if you sort of look at the crack spread. And he's like, look, this is a high risk. We're seeing these drone attacks in Russia. And he's like, this energy infrastructure around the world is being attacked, and it's so vulnerable to drone attacks, which is a relatively new form of asymmetric warfare. He's like, look, eventually this comes to the United States. It's one of the scary things. Julie and I were talking about this earlier on that segment, just the fact that what happens when we have a September 11 that includes drones? What happens when drones take out an entire airport? This is not, by the way, this is not theoretical. We've seen it in Russia, where the Ukrainians loaded a container full of a specialized container. They made it. It was and drove it into Russia, and then pressed basically a button, activated all these drones, and they went and took out an whole Air Force base, a Russian Air Force base, blew up the airplanes. So there is a precedent for that to be done, where we could see a commercial airport with drones take out an entire airport. And these airplanes, if you blow up a drone, we've seen the attacks of these warehouses in Russia. These things are rigged to blow up and be very explosive, and you attack an airport, it's got to be a really nasty situation. It scares the hell out of me.
This is an interesting time to be alive. So a decade ago, when we were doing drone strikes under Obama, people wrung their hands and said, this isn't really great, but this is what we're seeing happen. But now that technology is ubiquitous, you don't need a nuclear weapon to keep adversaries away from you. You can simply say, I will use these drones or small explosives and stop an entire strait of where all the fuel of the world comes from. And this is the problem we looked at when it came to Iran initially. I think a lot of people were excited, thinking it would be over relatively quickly, and maybe some people were a little bit too jubilant, but realistically, this is a country of 90 million people, 92 million people, and if they can stop the strait by simply threatening to make a mine, that's more powerful than a nuclear bomb.
But Matt, so Hormuz is one thing, but the one thing that Tom pointed out was that, and John Kingston has pointed out, is that all eyes should be on Russia, is that Ukrainian drones are taking out refinery capacity, diesel refinery capacity in Russia, which is why we have such inflated diesel prices in the United States, because it's a global commodity. The risks are that we see these same drones, these are consumer drones that you could buy, and I'm talking like everything from DJI drones that you can get on the internet to some of the more sophisticated ones that, a couple $1,000s, but there's commercial drones for that have been retrofitted, and even in some cases, in Ukrainians' case, specifically designed for these asymmetric attacks using, commercial-ready, consumer-ready parts. The reality is that it is an inevitability in our lifetime that we're going to see infrastructure, supply chain infrastructure, refineries in the United States attacked. I mean, I grew up, September 11 was a formative time in our lives because it was so shockingly, I don't know if the word shockingly obvious is the right term, the fact that this could happen, and the fact that it didn't is, if you look at history, the fact that it all happened at once. But it wasn't a very sophisticated attack. I mean, it was well-planned, well-funded, but it involved box cutters on commercial airplanes. And you look at that and you're like, of course this would have been a risk. My concern, Matt, and I want to get into this after the break, is when we start talking about commercial drones and civilian drones being used in a September 11 style attack, it's all going to hit supply chain infrastructure. And it's a really scary thought. So we'll get into that right after this break.
Once a year, the entire freight industry stops what it's doing and comes to one place, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is F3, the Future of Freight Festival. It isn't just a conference. It's the largest festival in freight, built to pull you all the way in. The energy, the ideas, the atmosphere, and the people who move this industry forward. Over 50 speakers, 4 events across 3 days, founders, executives, innovators, and disruptors, all under one roof, all asking the same question: what comes next? On the main stage, the sharpest minds in freight take on the biggest questions in the business, the trends, the technology, and the forces shaping what's ahead. Then the clock starts, 7 minutes, no exceptions. The cutting edge of freight tech goes head to head, live, battling for best in show. When the time's up, the lights go out. And in between, the conversations that don't happen anywhere else. The connections that change the trajectory of your business. The relationships you'll carry long after you leave. Because when the sessions end, the festival begins. Live entertainment, unforgettable experiences, a celebration of the world of freight, and an energy you won't find at any other event in the industry. The leaders you need, the access you won't get anywhere else. This is where knowledge is shared, where deals get done, where the future of freight gets decided. F3, Future of Freight Festival, October 27th and 28th. The Signal, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We'll see you there. Register now at live.freightwaves.com.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Today. So Matt, this whole drone attack on civilian, the Ukrainians would argue that these are not civilian, but they're maybe dual function warehouses and supply chains of, this Wildberry company in Russia, which is the equivalent of Amazon, is delivering in its logistics network parts that are being used for, attacks on Ukraine. They would argue, the Ukrainians have argued, it's fair game. What do you think about that?
This is a number that should terrify every single person in the world. In the Ukrainian-Russia conflict right now, 70 to 90% of all casualties, 70 to 90% of all casualties, that's injuries and fatalities, all of this, is done by drones. This is the new normal we're going to see in theater of war. And to your point, it doesn't just conflict it to the kill zone. It's not just right on the front lines. It is everywhere. And we are watching, like you and I are both history nerds when it comes to military warfare. It almost feels, and again, this is more cataclysmic than I would imagine, but like when you had World War I and you had infantry marching with horses and you had machine guns just destroying them, it's a different platform. It's a different fighting platform. And the use of drones, how ubiquitous they are, how cost effective they are, and the types of damage you can do, it boggles the mind. And you can go after, you might not be able to destroy an enemy militarily, but you can destroy absolutely everything that country requires to be able to feed their people or to move energy. And this is where we're going to see every conflict, I imagine, in the future is going to move towards this type of combat. I mean, it's not going to be big aircraft carriers. It's going to be small drones.
It also means that our logistics infrastructure in the United States is also vulnerable to these style attacks. And I go no further than watching the videos of these Russian warehouses that are equivalent to an Amazon warehouse, like completely turn into infernos through these drone attacks. You see them, it's on, I think, 14 out of something like 30 total of this logistics network are being blown up. And look, you don't, like these warehouses, they pack them to the gills of product. A lot of those products include things that are vulnerable to fire. And, particularly when you have electronics and you get into, battery technology, just these fires become total infernos. And look, we had a fire like that in the United States. The Kimberly-Clark warehouse in Southern California in Los Angeles, Southern California, totally incinerated. Something like $1 billion of damage was caused by this employee that got mad because he felt underpaid and decided to blow up set the whole warehouse on fire of toilet paper. And the point that I'm making on all of this is just how vulnerable our logistics infrastructure, and there isn't a whole lot we can do about it. I mean, the issue right now, the primary primary defensive weapon for these drones that the United States military has been working on are these essentially microwave technologies that can sort of send out a signal, and anything that's in the air, it will bring down. The problem is when you're dealing with civilian aircraft also in the air, it doesn't discriminate. You send out a pulse and you end up with commercial aircraft or civilian aircraft that are also taken out.
I mean, maybe you're going to have some defensive drones too that'll go after the ones that are coming in. I mean, this is an unprecedented time in world history where you have the ability to create, to your point, a very small platform to go deliver explosives to some warehouse or some rail yard or some terminal or some port and cause crazy amounts of damage. And the goal for a lot of these attacks, especially with the Ukrainian conflict in Russia, is to make the Russians realize that this is no longer worth the struggle and the hassle of sending your men to fight and then having at home being destroyed and bombarded. But this might just keep them more entrenched and want to continue this fight longer. And so it's just another tool.
But we know this because you and I cover it extensively, is the idea that a foreign actor, an Iranian state actor, who could put a container into a ship, comes into the United States, very small percentage of containers are inspected. That container could be sitting somewhere in a major city or in Southern California in the Inland Empire. and you're sitting in their inland empire, and all of a sudden, this container thing goes off, and you get these drones that go attack an entire logistics city. You know, we're talking 20, 40, 50, hundreds of them all at once. This is not a science fiction novel. This is stuff that could happen today and should be on the radar. And the problem is that there's been because we've never had these risks. I mean, growing up when I was a younger, post September 11, even before that, the World Trade Center attacks that happened in 1993, the Oklahoma City bombing, everyone was worried about big trucks coming in and blowing, full of fertilizer and nitrogen and these things blowing up. That was the big issue. And then it was suicide bombers. And we saw September 11 and some of the other attempted attacks. But now the issue is that these drones provide sort of unprecedented remote level detonation. And with satellite technology, you can easily transmit this. I mean, I think Starlink is an amazing company, but it is meant to allow for universal access. You don't need a cell. I mean, it could even be on a cell network. It doesn't matter. These technologies are going to respond to the network, and there's no way to prevent it because we enjoy access to these technologies. Like, no one's going to set back the clock. But it strikes me that this is not a risk that's being talked about as much as it should be.
I tend to agree with you that the general media is not talking about it in this context, but I'm certain that the Department of War and others think about this type of problem every single day. We remember the pressure cooker bomb at the Boston Marathon a long, long time ago. But as we all kind of know, strategy can win battles, but it's logistics that wins wars. And if you can cripple someone's logistics infrastructure, you can cripple their ability to conduct, whatever types of military operations you can imagine. And this ubiquitous nature of these technologies, because these are hobbyists. Hobbyists love these same types of drones that can be outfitted to do something horrifyingly dangerous.
But they're not even, yes, there's the hobbyists taking pictures, but there's also commercial applications for drones. And we're very soon having drone delivery. Zipline and we've seen Amazon has been testing these things. UPS has been testing these things. I mean, we're dealing with a world where drone delivery, bringing packages, is coming. And the risks, the security risks have grown exponential because that package may not be your burrito. It could be something far more nefarious. And that's the scary part as I think about it, because you mentioned it, trench warfare was a World War I thing. You sort of had the introduction of a very rudimentary tanks in World War I and chemical weapons and stuff. And then World War II, it was the airplane that won the war. And you could argue that the atomic bomb that over Japan was an airplane derivative. You couldn't have launched that without an airplane. And now what we're looking at, and you fast forward to targeted what the United States did in Desert Storm. The first one was sort of highly targeted weapon. The sort of wiping out, sort of winning in the war in the air allowed us to win on the ground. War evolves, but what I think is happening in Ukraine is both incredibly interesting if you study war in history, but also frightening for someone who's in supply chains. Because you now realize that this is, as you point out, the idea that you're going to come attack America from Mexico or Canada, these are relatively weak countries to the United States, is unrealistic. But what prevents a state actor or a terrorist organization from deploying this technology and wreaking havoc on our refineries or our warehouse infrastructure or our bridges? It's not a far-fetched reality here, Matt.
Now, and when you talk about the nuclear weapons, like one of the interesting things, so I grew up in Chicago, and we had around Chicago these things called Nike missile sites. And these are missiles that were designed to intercept intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the missiles would be coming to the big city, and you'd shoot up nuclear weapons, small nuclear weapons, to blow up around the city so that the big nuke coming from overseas was knocked down. And we lived in that terror. I mean, what our parents lived through during the Cold War is very different in terms of what we think of today. I mean, in the Cold War days, we thought if there was a nuclear exchange, God willing, it was just one, not a bunch of them. But as we get fast forward to what we see today, it's not these massive destructions of everything, these giant nuclear bombs. No one seems to be willing to do that at all. But these small targeted things that can do immense damage with a very low cost point, that's a real reality we have to wrestle with. And I do not know if many logistics companies even consider this. I mean, they might say, oh, well, the Suez Canal might have a problem, or Panama might have a problem, or Iran has a problem. But they're not thinking about if we lose the rail yards in Long Beach.
But Matt, they shouldn't. This is the problem you end up with capitalism. And then, look, I'm a diehard capitalist. I don't want anyone accusing me of going communist on us. But the challenge is that the companies, the kinds of investments, because again, it's asymmetric, which means it's unpredictable. It means that it's coming out of nowhere. You don't know where it's going to come out of. And so if you're building a warehouse, we're having to worry about this because the chances of it are actually quite small. They just are. If it's your warehouse, that's why you have insurance, because the risks of your warehouse catching on fire is infinitely small, but if it does it causes catastrophic damage. The problem that you get, though, if we're talking about a September 11 style attack, I mean, look, the reality is September 11 was an absolute travesty for the families and horrific. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. And it affected all of us. But we're talking 4 airplanes in that day. There were thousands in the sky. It doesn't take much to change the psychological impact. And we're talking supply chains. There are critical choke points that you could see a September 11 style attack. Imagine what 50 of these Ukrainian style drones would do at LAX or Chicago O'Hare.
Absolutely.
Like, that's scary stuff. And we're not talking about this in inconceivable. You take an explosive, like as a pilot, I spent a lot of time around airplanes. Airplanes are built to be lightweight, so they use lightweight metals. They're full of fuel and they're full of people. And they're incredibly vulnerable. They're open landscapes, the perfect spot for drone activity. And these airports are not as secure from the air. That's the problem. We saw this in Ukraine where, again, it was, they have taken out military Air Force bases deep into the country and deep into Russia through drone attacks. And we saw, not too long ago, this would have been 2 years ago, in New Jersey. By the way, I saw one of these. I didn't believe it. I read, he's hearing all these drone things, and I kind of made fun of people on X for getting excited about drones. And I was like, well, at this point, it was all UFOs, right? Remember that 2 years ago?
I do.
Everybody, and I was like, come on, UFOs are not using red and green lights. That's a civilian aircraft, right? They're not announcing their presence here. It's interesting now, the UAP thing is far more interesting to me than it was back then. But there was a period where something or someone was testing drones over New Jersey. And so I was up there over the holidays. My wife's family's from there. And we were driving down the interstate, and this was sort of at the peak when they were sort of ubiquitous. And we saw one, and I was like, that's an airplane. That's not, and it kept getting closer and closer and closer. And realized the thing was 50 feet off the interstate. It was just standing there. It was just watching us. So it was there. It was at, early evening. But it strikes me that this feels like something that's fairly obvious, how vulnerable our supply chains are, how vulnerable we are. And the drone stuff, I think, if anything would keep us up at night, is taking out a refinery, taking out a major oil refinery. As Tom told us earlier this week, is these things are not, they're just massive bombs because they're so vulnerable. You bring in a drone and take out a refinery, and you're going to knock out U.S. refinery interest. You do take out 10 refineries across the United States, you're talking about knocking out an enormous amount of our infrastructure.
The sad part, you're absolutely right that the potential sits there, but the sad part of a lot of this is you never prepare for anything that you haven't had happen to you yet. So you don't do all the new things until something catastrophic happens. And once that catastrophic thing happens, then you go and try to make preventative measures. That's like the shoe bomber, have to take your shoes off at the airport. All these things happen and then you react to it.
And I'm really mad at him, by the way, because like he just calls so much. I mean, he wasn't even successful. He tried to light his shoe with a match. Luckily for the people, they caught it. But like, come on, dude. Like the bottled water people in the UK, remember that? They were trying to mix explosives in the bathroom, and you have to. But now you can't bring on water. Like the amount of. This is what we're talking about. Is first of all, a shoe bomber only burned himself because the shoe blew up, but it didn't blow up, but it like burned and incinerated him. Like he ended up having burns. And all the other people were like, no, dude, and they like jumped on him and stuff. But he calls so much discomfort. But it seems, I mean, I'm making fun of him, deservedly so. He deserves it. But the reality is like, this is exactly what we're talking about. It doesn't take much to change the way an entire supply chain and the way a whole country operates.
And this is the part where I dovetail one of my favorite topics, which is autonomous trucks. So there is a time in this world where a lot of freight, or at least a good portion of freight, will be moved by a fully autonomous truck, maybe a remote operator, maybe a remote assistant or whatever. But this idea of hacking into those remote systems and then doing something catastrophic, those are other questions that we have to think about, because so often technology outpaces our ability to regulate it and come up with safe ways to deal with it. But we are in a moment in time where we can kind of predict or say, well, this is something we ought to be really focusing on. And the problem is everyone's attention span is so short. No one wants to think about what life is like in 3 years, let alone next month. And
but
that's a problem we have.
Private businesses are never going to spend the money to protect against
Absolutely.
and that's the issue. I mean, earlier this week, I asked the CEO of right after the Tom episode, where we talked about drone warfare. He brought it up, and this reason it's sort of been top of mind this week for me. We had the CEO of GXO on, great interview, by the way, and I asked point blank, have they done anything? Have they thought about this potential, this risk? And the answer was no, and why would you? Yeah. If you're a private business, you're not going to spend the money, because it's sort of like the preppers. And during a couple of years ago, I went and bought like a bunch of food, like MREs.
That's right, meals ready to eat. That's good.
Yeah, if the world ended, the chances of that happen is infinitely small. But it is like if you measure the fact across the whole supply chain, where it could be anything. We're talking airports, we're talking rail yards, we're talking warehouses, ships, container ports, like whatever you want, name it. These risks are real. Like they're real, and it will happen. I will make a prediction, Matt. Within the next couple of years, there will be a drone attack on some U.S. supply chain infrastructure that will catch us all off guard. I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'd say that if it's
feels
possible,
inevitable to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if it's possible, it's probable. If it's probable, it's inevitable.
So who should be protecting us? It feels like a federal government thing, right?
Well, first of all, I hope that if this ever does happen, no one says, I got this idea from Freight Expectations listening to Craig Fuller. I hope no one ever does that. But I
noticed that you didn't mention your name in that either, by the way.
They already blame me. They always blame the Lord. They will absolutely hold me accountable. I think this is the homeland security. I mean, this is the whole idea of counterterrorism and surveillance technologies is designed to try to find and identify and stop terrorist attacks and things of that nature. I don't know how you prevent this. This is a different world.
By the way, Matt, I think credit to, Palantir gets a really bad rep. It's very controversial, we'll say. But I mean, credit to the Department of Homeland Security. Growing up in a post-7, coming of age, if you will, I was, when September 11 happened, I was 22. The thought we always had, for years after September 11, it was, this could be the day. I mean, I remember going into New York or Washington, D.C. years after that and thinking, I don't know if I feel safe here. Because you were told about these issues.
Yeah, just to kind of give a quick anecdote on 9/11. So my father was in California when 9/11 happened. He was supposed to fly home from California back to Chicago that day, and all the flights were stopped. So what he did was he rented a car and drove nonstop, chewing on coffee beans to keep himself awake to finally get home because he didn't know when the flights were coming to come back. And when you're a little kid, I mean, I was in high school at that point, but it just completely changed how we looked at our own safety, because for so long, America has enjoyed the fact that we have two massive oceans that protect us from just about anything. And that moment was showing that we were vulnerable to very specific types of attacks. And we've done things to stop future versions of that. But to your point, and it's just very accurate, the technology is so easy to do. It's a matter of time when this thing takes place. And God willing, it's nothing substantial and it fails, but you never know. And it's a big world, it's a big supply chain. And one thing that happens a world away can impact you right in your own house.
Yeah, I mean, look, unfortunately, it only takes one as they toss in a post-September. I mean, my kids wouldn't even know what we're talking about because they didn't grow up with that overarching fear, that thought process. And I remember right after those days and months and even years after that, is you kind of always feel like you had to watch your back a little bit, be a little bit more careful. And this was all over the news. If you see something, say something. I remember
That's right.
I worked in air freight on September 11. I was working at the DFW airport, and just there was a heightened sense of awareness. We were watching every piece of cargo, and any time there was suspicious activity, we would report it because we didn't know. Like, you just were so convinced that it was just an inevitability. And that's exactly what these terrorist organizations want to do. And like, everyone's watching this stuff that's happening in Ukraine. And even if you're pro-Ukraine, which I certainly am, and would love to see Russia, they're always an enemy of the United States. It's the way as my America thinking is I'm going to root for Ukraine because I'm going to root against Russia. The fact is that anyone watching what's happening in Ukraine and the innovation and the intelligence that's driving all of that should be absolutely petrified about the same thing happening to our infrastructure and supply chain infrastructure in the United States, because it is vulnerable to exactly what you said. The United States has the freest, I'm a pilot, we have the freest airspace in the world. Europe has a very restricted airspace. It's a miserable place to be a pilot, by the way. It is a wonderful place to be a pilot in the United States because we have a very open skies, freedom of flight. A lot of times you don't even have to check in with air traffic control if you're not in certain airspaces. It's an amazing place to be a pilot. In fact, European pilots come to the United States to fly because they enjoy the freedoms that you do not get in Europe. The point is, our skies are open. Technology is coming. Drone warfare is real. Drone terrorist attacks are real. You could argue that is what we've seen in Iran. It's what we've seen against infrastructure in all throughout the Middle East on refinery infrastructure, logistics infrastructure. And it is something that should be on every radar of any risk professional. And I hope that the federal government is considering this. You said that the Department of War has to be thinking about it. I hope that they are. I hope the Department of Homeland Security is taking this risk for real. And it's a brave new world.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why aircraft carriers aren't getting super close to Iran, because right now, to your point, these are multi-billion-dollar assets that were the pinnacle of military ingenuity. And it was what was one of the deciding factors in World War II was the use of these incredible platforms where planes could land and go all across the area. And those can be completely destroyed with a couple of drones. And that is the change that we are now kind of reconciling with, is small things can cause massive damages, massive.
I mean, imagine,
so,
and I hate to say this, but imagine what would happen if one, think about Louisville, Kentucky, UPS's Worldport, or Cincinnati, Ohio, where Amazon has its hub, or Memphis, Tennessee. We're not talking about that you have to be all over the country. You could be in a major logistics city, a major logistics infrastructure in the Inland Empire, and it would just be incredibly easy, because of the freedoms that we enjoy, to take these logistics infrastructures out. And unfortunately, there's not a lot we are prepared to do about it right now.
absolutely.
So on a depressing note, Matt, I hope that you have a great weekend. I hope that our audience tunes in to the next great episode of Freight Expectations. And we'll be back on Monday with FreightWaves Today starting at noon. Talk to you then.